Richard Attenborough is also one of the stars in tomorrow evening's film on BBC2. He plays the part of a police commander at odds with a tough cop from Chicago, Jim Brannigan, who's been sent to London to track down a notorious American crook. John Wayne plays Brannigan tomorrow night at 7:10 on BBC2. That's except for viewers to BBC Wales. John le Carré's The Spy Who Came In From the Cold with Richard Burton, Claire Bloom and Oscar Werner in a plot to discredit the KGB.
A shark can smell blood a mile off when he's hungry. And Munt is hungry for our blood. Name me a counter-espionage head who isn't hungry for one high-grade defecting spy.
So I'm to defect. What do you believe?
History. Partly. Partly freedom, partly.
Oh, nah. Don't tell me you're a bloody communist.
Yes.
Bird watching's one of my hobbies. I often come here.
You also often come to Wormwood Scrubs prison at 8 o'clock in the morning to watch birds?
Yes, jailbirds. They're my other hobby.
Only the young ones, surely.
I wonder whether you're tired. Burnt out. Well, that's a phenomenon we understand here. It's like metal fatigue. One can't stay out of doors all the time. One needs to come in from the cold.
The Spy Who Came In From the Cold tomorrow at 9 o'clock on BBC2. On BBC2 now, Philip Japp stars in his own show with guest appearances by Kenny Lynch, Peter Powell, Fiona Richmond and Simon Ward. That's except for viewers to BBC Scotland. Here on 2 now, Newsnight.
Good evening and Happy New Year from us all. Welcome to another season of Newsnight, and as you can see already, we have new premises and a slightly different style and format. Tonight's stories include the legal tangle in meshing the EEC's fishing nets. Is Britain acting within the law in keeping the Danes out of our inshore fishing grounds? As Kent Kirk, that mixture of would-be Norse hero and stuntman, puts to sea, leading a Danish fishing challenge to Britain, the Danes tell us why they believe the courts should decide who is in the right in the dispute. In 1982, Britain regained the Falklands and fought on in Northern Ireland. In 1983, yesterday's victims of both conflicts will continue on the long struggle back to physical recovery. We report from the Joint Services Centre that tries to work miracles with the severely wounded, none of whom lack courage.
Yeah, well, I'm 20 years old now, and it happened when I was 19, so I'm quite young, but there's people who are born with things like me from the start, so I'm not that bad off.
A moving report on that later by Sally Hardcastle. In Prague, the Soviet Union's leader, Yuri Andropov, leads the Warsaw Pact in drawing up a common policy front on nuclear disarmament in an attempt to head off NATO's installation of cruise missiles. But how solid is the Warsaw Pact, and how difficult is it for the Russians to keep their buffer zone intact? I'll be asking Britain's leading authority on Eastern Europe, Michael Kayser.
Also tonight, the Assistant Governor of Parkhurst Prison is still being held hostage after 12 hours. One of the 2 kidnappers is a prisoner with a brutal record. A Conservative MP is to try to change the law governing dental practice after the mother of one of his constituents died in the dentist's chair during a general anaesthetic. Dentists, he says, should never be allowed to give general anaesthetics to their own patients. They just aren't fully qualified to do so. The president of the General Dental Council, Sir Frank Lawton, agrees, but he says there's nothing he can do to stop them. And we try to find out why, if more volcanoes like this one start erupting, we could be in for a new ice age.
In just 24 hours from now, the Danish fisherman's leader, Kent Kirk, expects to be off the British fishing grounds in his trawler, Sand Kirk, ready to challenge the 12-mile limit round Britain's coast. Following him are up to 100 other Danish fishing boats, battling through North Sea storms and ready, they say, to risk arrest by the Navy's fishery protection vessels. Britain has imposed the 12-mile limit because Denmark blocked the common market's new fisheries agreement. Early today at the Danish port of Esbjerg, Mr. Kirk, a Danish Euro MP who's created a media circus around him, turned down the offer of a Viking helmet, saying he hoped any confrontation would be friendly. He also quoted a famous British admiral.
I expect every man to do his duty now, was what Lord Nelson said. Yeah.
Remember what he did in Copenhagen. Then he sailed off ahead to what now seems to be an inevitable clash off Britain's coast. From Esbjerg, he is heading for the Sprat fishing ground off the northeast coast, where the 12-mile limit will probably be breached. Also protected are the so-called Shetlands box and the rich mackerel grounds off western Scotland. Well, for 6 years now, the 10 EEC countries have been struggling to find an acceptable formula to settle fishing limits and quotas on catches of Europe's dwindling fish stock. Last October, agreement, it seemed, had been reached. 9 of the 10 members, excluding Denmark, accepted a package of restrictions. Final concessions on quotas were made to woo the Danes, but these were rejected. In a last-minute attempt to patch up a deal before Christmas, a compromise was accepted by the Danish government, only to be scuttled by its opposition on a powerful Danish parliamentary committee. So the community faced 1983 without a fishing policy, opening up Europe's fishing grounds to a free-for-all. EEC officials have been trying to coordinate the proposals agreed by 9 members last autumn into a legal stopgap. But in the absence of any EEC policy, Britain has led the way in arguing the case for implementing national rules. But the Danes, led by Kent Kirk, maintain their right to complete freedom of access to EEC waters, and they're prepared to test their case in the European Court of Justice. So the EEC Commission, meeting tomorrow, will have to decide whether to throw its weight behind 9 sets of national regulations or to allow the Danes to have a veto on an otherwise acceptable fisheries policy. Earlier this evening, I asked Jürgen Hertzhoff, the permanent secretary to the Danish Ministry of Fisheries, whether his government considered the national measures implemented without EEC rationalization actually to be legal.
No, not by making national measures, because as far as I understand, the British government had sought the approval of the Commission. But apart from that, I think there's a possibility that the Danish government will challenge some of the national measures you have implemented already.
Norman Buchan, what do you feel about the legality of the situation?
Well, I think the thing is very obscure. I think that we are right to take the measures we're taking. I think that the Danes got a better deal out of the agreement than we got, and I think we're entitled to protect our stock in the way they're doing it. Now, the government's position, and I can't speak for the government because I've been critical of their acceptance of this agreement, but the government position is that if the Commission endorses their national measures, that makes it legal. I believe that may still have to be proved in the courts.
What about that, Mr. Hertzhoff, that in fact the Danes have got a rather better deal from this agreement than the British have done, that we've surrendered far too much?
Well, we do not agree to that point of view. But at the moment, it's not a matter whether we have got a better proposal than the UK has got. Now it's a matter whether these national measures can be approved also by the European Court when it comes to the end of the day.
Do you in that case approve of the actions of Mr. Kent Kirk in trying to bring this matter to the attention of the court?
If that's the only way in order to find a peaceful way to bring the matter to the court, it's okay. But I think personally that Mr. Kent Kirk has exaggerated the matter.
Norman Buchan, what do you feel about Mr. Kirk's action? How should the British government react?
I think we should react very firmly. I think that we should take every possible measure to protect our stocks and to protect our waters. And I think that the moment they start fishing there, especially if they use the kind of purse net that they have been using, then I think we should intervene.
In that case, what would the Danish government do if Mr. Kirk is subjected to very considerable fines and confiscation by our law?
Well, the Danish government has advised all our fishermen, including Mr. Kent Kirk, not to make any provocation at the moment, but to try to fish legally in the traditional areas and in the traditional manner. And therefore, I'm quite sure that the Danish government will not pay any fines or confiscation or lawyers or anything like that.
You won't treat him as some sort of national Viking hero?
Or, if not a Viking hero, but anyway, as an ambitious politician who tries to find whether our legal point of view is correct or not.
Norman Buchan, what do you think the EEC Commission is likely to do? Do you think that they will ratify the British
I
position?
think they will endorse the position, because I think they will reflect the position of the Basic Nine. It's a question of 9 to 1. And I think they will therefore endorse the national measures being taken. But whether that is sufficiently binding in law has to be proved. What I am saying is that we must take steps to prevent the fishing, because we too want to see it tested.
Mr. Herzog, do you think the EEC Commission is going to come down firmly on the side, not just of Britain, but of the other 8 as well?
I'm not sure in this special matter, because according to my opinion, there is not fully agreement inside the Commission's legal services, so we are very anxious to hear whether the Commission will approve this national measure or not.
But can I get one thing clear? If the Commission does approve the national measures, will the Danish government then accept that as the end of the story?
I'm not sure, because in the situation we are, in the situation in which we are, I think it will be a natural thing to try to find whether the legal point of view that the Commission and the UK and maybe the other 8 member states have is correct, or whether our point of view is correct.
Mr. Herzog, thank you.
That's the only way to find that out, is to bring the matter before the European Court in Luxembourg.
Mr. Herzog, thank you very much. Now, Norman Buchan, you in any case think this is still a bad agreement which is hardly worth defending, don't you?
I didn't say it's hardly worth defending. On the contrary, we have to defend it very thoroughly. But I do think it's a very bad deal. If you look at 2 things, quotas, that's the amount of fish we're entitled to have, and the limits. Up to last year, the position of the British Parliament has been that we want a 12-mile exclusive zone and a 50 miles dominant preference, where we would decide to fish. Now, Peter Walker and this government has thrown that completely out of the window. Secondly, before the election, the Prime Minister, Margaret Thatcher, said that our partners must recognize that most of the fish, the majority of the fish, 2/3 to be precise, is in British waters, and that any quota agreement should be at least aligned to that kind of figure.
And we've got 36%
We've only
of the
got a
quota.
third. That's right. In other words, a half of what the fish stocks would entitle us to.
Right,
now, these are 2 very bad elements, and that is why I've been opposing this particular agreement.
I'll put it the other way around then. The very fact that it is an unsatisfactory agreement means that agreement as it is, it has to be policed very, very strongly.
Absolutely, all the more so, because since they have, if it were all agreed, that it's still a sufficient inroads into our stocks. And the fact to fish it even more, of course, makes it even more serious.
Norman Buchan, MP. Last year will go down in British history as the year of the Falklands. This year may go down as the year of the Falklands reckoning. But as the politicians dodge and weave to escape responsibility, you may be sure that the forgotten people will be those who risked their lives, who suffered severe wounds, and whose lives may never be the same hereafter. 250 were killed in the Falklands and 800 injured. And in that same year, 28 soldiers were killed in Northern Ireland and many others wounded. They too are often overlooked. If the wounded do recover, that's due in part to the work of the Special Armed Services Unit, the scene of intense devotion, skill and courage. Sally Hardcastle now reports on their work.
The headlines detailing damage done by bombs and bullets disappear quickly. The damage doesn't. The most frightening and demoralizing battle a soldier can face is with the pain and disability caused by wounds. 7 months after his thigh and pelvis were smashed by shrapnel at San Carlos Bay, 22-year-old Marine Commando Jerry Watt is still weak, 2 stone underweight and unable to stand for long.
So come on, a little bit more. Now, hold it there. Right, try and close your eyes for 2 seconds. Ready? 1.
One of 26 Falkland survivors sent to a special rehabilitation unit. His young, active life changed in an instant.
At the time when I seen the aircraft coming in, I made a break for it, like to try and get some cover, and everybody was running around because we didn't have any air raid warning at the time. So we dived into this Sanger. It was about 2 sandbags thick, but as I was on my way in, like, the bomb just exploded, and next thing I know I was on my back, and there was other blokes around me, in really bad wounds, pain. One lad was dead, and there was about 4 or 5 injured.
It must be difficult when you were a particularly fit commando to have to face the fact that you're not as fit.
That's right, it's depressing. I mean, I used to be a runner and that myself. My squadron holds quite a few runners back in Plymouth that run for the Army and the Marines, everything. It is a bit depressing, like, you know, when you see people running around and that. You wish you were up there as well.
Jerry Watt is one of 150 wounded recovering at the Joint Services Rehabilitation Centre housed at a Royal Air Force camp in Surrey. It's a service unit, not a hospital. The discipline of forces life applies. The day starts at 08:45 hours with 15 minutes of vigorous warm-up exercises. With short breaks for rest and food, physical effort continues non-stop in gym, physiotherapy and occupational therapy. The Welsh Guards burnt in the attack on the Sir Galahad during the Falklands landings spend all day stretching tissue and bone distorted by fire. These hands may never again be able to hold a rifle, but physiotherapists spend hours pulling and pushing them back into some use. Not all those in the unit are this seriously injured, but everyone has been close to death at an age when most of life is still ahead. At times the regime, the push for fitness, seems to the outsider too tough, too military. But according to consultant Wing Commander Alec Treasury, that's why it works.
They are basically fit in the first place, or we hope they are. And in order to do the job that we are trying to do, it needs to be tough, it needs to be active, it needs in a way to be aggressive, bearing in mind the patient's reaction to their injury. But it needs to be aggressive in order to get them to that full stage of fitness that we're aiming for.
So can the NHS learn something from the methods?
I don't think it's a question of necessarily learning anything. I think they know it anyway. In fact, I'm sure they do. It's just that the facilities aren't there, and I think the hospitals just couldn't cope with it anyway. I don't think they would necessarily learn anything from us.
That's it. Go on, keep going, keep going, keep going. Good. And down once more.
Lance Corporal David Timms was blown up by the bomb beneath the Regent's Park bandstand last July. He's 29, married with 2 daughters, aged now 8 months and 3 years. David Timms joined up at 16 and became a drummer come stretcher bearer. After an 8-month tour in Northern Ireland, his band had just come back to play a series of concerts in England.
I started the concert, then just halfway through playing Oliver, and something out of the ordinary happened, and I came to and I was laying on the grass, just behind the bandstand, looking at the pond with the ducks in it, and that's about as far as I can remember from that time onwards.
Because, of course, you were pretty well paralysed for several weeks.
I broke my neck and fractured, well, my nose was fractured, my wrist was fractured, broke both my heels, plus the sort of splinters and flash burns from the explosion, lacerations of, you know.
And your spine as well, I gather.
Yeah, well, it's all to do with the same. The broken neck is damaged part of the spine there somewhere, which has paralysed both my legs, well, from the waist down, really. But it's coming back slowly but surely.
How's your wife finding it?
She's all right, you know, I think the 2 kids keep her quite occupied, so she hasn't got time to think about me too much. You know.
There must be times, though, when both of you get a bit down.
Yeah, most weekends when I get home, she usually ends up in tears when she sees me. You know. Oops, because of this, you know, because being in the wheelchair, I suppose, which is quite natural, I think. But usually she's okay by the time I leave, you know, sort it all out.
Is it getting easier at home now?
Oh yeah, definitely, yeah. Because the more I can get around, it makes it easier for her, because she can spend more time with the children and less time with me. You know, I can do just about everything myself, and except the time my shoelaces up, you know.
And how have the children reacted?
The oldest one tends to push her luck a lot more, I think, because, you know, Daddy can't catch me because he can't walk, sort of touch.
Not all service wounded can get even this far. It was 3 months before David Timms could be moved from military hospital to the rehabilitation centre, but now his progress is quite fast.
It's about 4 months from his injury, and one can guess, but you can't be certain. I think we'd be happy to say that we would hope to see him back playing some form of musical instrument again, and that the degree of mobility as regards his legs, again, we're optimistic, both from the progress he's made so far and the fact that there is function of a sort in all the muscles of his legs, and therefore we can be a little bit more optimistic.
Link your hands. That's it. Get your balance. Now touch my hand. Slowly.
Yet another casualty of Northern Ireland violence, Rifleman John Moore has spent 17 months getting to move under his own power. His observation post in South Armagh was ambushed, and a bullet passed through his neck, paralysing his spine. Both his physical and mental rehabilitation have been slow.
He has come to terms much more with his disability, and even more than that, with his future, because when he arrived, he was still hopeful that somewhere in the service there would be a niche for him. But we've discussed this, and he's really too good an individual to just have any old job. He was clearly destined to be a pretty good soldier at the time of his accident, and he's not the sort of person who would be satisfied with a job somewhere, perhaps an important job, but not a very interesting job. And I think he's got a future ahead of him, and this is what we've aimed for.
Gently.
Both John Moore and his therapists are still putting hours of effort into strengthening his legs and spine.
And just pushing yourself forwards, using your back. There. There.
He stays openly cheerful and insists he rarely even gets secretly depressed.
Sometimes, occasionally, that's natural for everyone, I suppose. But I can get out and about. At least I can walk on crutches now, so it's not too bad.
What kind of things get you down there?
Well, for instance, when I'm walking here, say, and there's me going at a slow pace, and all the other lads who've got injuries are going a lot quicker. It's the slowness of it. The recovery's a bit slow, I feel, anyway.
Do you ever get bitter about what happened to you?
No, let's put it this way, I'm not bitter against the Irish people themselves. Obviously, the people that actually did this, I don't feel too happy about, but the Irish people themselves are great.
But it must be very hard being as young as you are, and then suddenly something like this happens, and...
Yeah, well, I'm 20 years old now, and it happened when I was 19, so I'm quite young, but there's people who are born with things like me from the start, so I'm not that bad off.
How do you stay so cheerful?
Oh, I'm not in any pain, so why not? It's easy.
He was, of course, a motorcycle accident with his wife on the pillion.
There's a mass of expertise here, both civilian and military. Each week, for example, a team of gym instructors, therapists and medical specialists meet to discuss head injury patients.
We still feel we've got something to offer him.
We're going to get some improvement.
Yeah.
The head injury section, like the rest of the unit, is full, but at the moment not with war wounded. Soldiers are as prone as anyone else to crashing cars and motorcycles.
Paul was involved in a road traffic accident on the 21st of June of this year and was admitted to the Newcastle General Hospital. He had some pretty devastating injuries, as you will remember, and he was found with a stake in his head and one through his shoulder, and he had severe brain damage.
Paul Williams is an RAF gunner and is given the same concentrated treatment as any airman injured in battle. He's responding to it.
Is the man shouting?
No.
No. Is the man sleeping?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Is the man awake?
No.
No, he's not awake. Good. Is the boy buttoning his trousers?
Yes.
Is he?
Yeah.
Is he? Where are his trousers?
Because he hasn't got them once.
Where are his trousers?
No.
His trousers are there.
I know.
That's a shirt.
That's what he's buttoning. He's buttoning his shirt.
Forces rehabilitation is aimed at getting men fit to do their job again, to march, to run, to tote a rifle and pack, and do so in the face of war. Some, like Paul Williams, John Moore and David Timms, may never progress that far, but a surprising number do. This is the unit's final test for combat readiness. Among those running with a 35-pound pack is a soldier with part of his foot missing, and another with a back injury from a parachute jump. Still, they completed 8 miles. An exhausting but simple aim. Those who can't reach it face a more complex challenge. He works on alone.
How they cope at home, going to the local pub and living at home or going to work and that kind of thing, is very difficult for us to assess honestly, and this is one of the problems of this job and this field.
Yes, because it does seem that while everything may be wonderful here, and they may actually get on terribly well here, in the end, it's life outside.
That's right, and of course, they don't have the occupational therapists and the physios and all the other staff that we have at home. Although it is, local services are available, it's not quite the same thing, and they haven't got the security of our sort of community. And if their parents or relatives perhaps don't adjust to the situation themselves, it is an extremely difficult problem for the patient when he gets home.
Rifleman Moore goes home every weekend driving his specially adapted car. Going home permanently is the next step.
I lead a fairly normal life now, really. I'm just a bit slow on my feet and have the inconvenience of to plan things ahead a bit more, that's all. My mum still fusses a bit, but it's okay. She spoils me a bit, you know. I've had a girlfriend ever since I got the injury. In fact, I met her just before I went back to Ireland, so I'm okay as far as that goes.
Right, see you again, no doubt. Bye.
You haven't got any tablets, have you, Dave?
Yeah, I've got them. Yeah.
This was the first time David Timms's parents had seen him since he left hospital some weeks before. The shock for them and for his young wife is still very new. It's his family that keeps Lance Corporal Timms progressing.
I intend to be walking, put that before I leave here. Whether it's walking properly or not, I don't really care. My life is my injuries, so you know, I intend to get better because I need my hands, feet, especially playing my drums and the 2 children, you know. So I shan't give up until they say that that's it, you know.
How do you think he's looking?
Oh, very much better. He's certainly a great improvement on when we took him out the hospital at Paddington. He's certainly looking better, yeah, and being cheeky as ever to the nurses, and he's always been like that.
Have you been very worried about him?
When it first happened, very, very worried, and it was, you know, when we heard about his mates that had worse troubles in him. But I think he's a bit obstinate and got the willpower to live, and he's certainly proving it now, hasn't he?
When he joined the army, David Timms knew he might face death and injury. All servicemen do. They also know they may have to inflict it. But they can't know what injury means. The pain, the paralysis, the end of one phase of life. However good the care the wounded receive, however high the compensation payments, it's not only the dead that feel the permanent effect of weapons of war.
Right, bend. Pull down. Bend. Stretch back.
How much? How much touches?
Oh, no.
Even the bigger one this morning?
Bend. Bend. Pull.
The reporter, Sally Hardcastle. A visit to the dentist may not be a happy prospect for many of us, but at least there's not much danger attached to it. Or is there? Well, one Conservative MP, John Heddle, is planning to try to change the law governing one aspect of dentistry, the giving of general anaesthetics, because he believes dentists simply are not qualified to give them. His anxiety stems from a tragedy 2 years ago when the mother of one of his constituents died in the dentist's chair while under a general anaesthetic. The dentist, Cure Labrol from Birmingham, was convicted of manslaughter, given an 18-month suspended sentence and fined £1,000. He's been continuing to practice since then, pending an appeal to the Home Secretary and the examination of his case by the General Dental Council, the dentist's disciplinary body. So how well trained is a dentist to carry out a general anaesthetic? Well, the answer seems to be not very. During a dentist's training, just over 4 years long, only about 2 weeks is wholly devoted to the teaching of general anaesthetics. Not nearly long enough, many doctors believe, for them to learn, for instance, how different drugs react against each other. Even vets, they say, are better trained than dentists. Dentists do, though, get extensive training in sedation and local anaesthetics. A senior professor at London's University College Hospital told me that any graduate from his dental school should definitely seek extra training if he wants to give a general anaesthetic. By contrast, in a hospital, a doctor always calls on an anaesthetist to give the appropriate drugs. A consultant anaesthetist is always on hand, and he's a qualified doctor with 6 extra years training solely in anaesthetics. It's true to say, though, that dentists reach for the gas far less often now than they used to. But according to MP John Heddle, one death is one too many. He wants to table amendments to the dentist's bill now on its way through Parliament.
Firstly, that an anaesthetic shall not be administered by a dental surgeon to a member of the public unless that dental surgeon has a specific training in general anaesthesia. Secondly, that that anaesthetic should not be administered to the patient of that dentist without a third party being present. And thirdly, I believe that the bill should place a responsibility on the General Dental Council to be much more specific in the cases of dental surgeons who are convicted of a criminal offence, as indeed in the case of the tragic case of my constituent's mother, where a patient dies and manslaughter has proved to have taken place. I think the General Dental Council should have a duty to suspend that dentist until his appeal, either to the Court of Appeal or to the Home Secretary, has been determined.
Do you think the dental profession itself could do more to improve the situation?
I think it would be impertinent of me as a Member of Parliament to criticise the dental profession for what it has not yet done. What it has done, however, is to recognise that there is a real problem here. Indeed, the President of the General Dental Council in his presidential address in November 1980 actually highlighted the point when he said, in effect, that any dentist that administers anaesthetics without the presence of a third party is being highly irresponsible.
The President of the General Dental Council is Sir Frank Lawton, who's in our Manchester studio. Sir Frank, if you believe, as you do, that dentists should not give general anaesthetics by themselves, why haven't you acted to prevent them from doing so?
We have advised them that it is wrong to do so, but it would be impossible to monitor that everyone did in fact comply with an instruction. It's only when something goes wrong that you're aware that they are breaking the rules.
But could you not make it a disciplinary offence for a dentist so to do?
Yes, in my address to the Council in, I think it was November 1980, I did in fact say that any dentist who carried on with this practice of single-handed operator anaesthetist could find himself found guilty of what the Dentist Act calls infamous or disgraceful conduct in a professional respect.
Do you believe that dentists at the moment themselves are properly qualified to carry out anaesthetics?
They have probably a better training now than they have ever had in the theory of anaesthesia, but naturally with an increasingly complex course the time available is limited and they have less practical experience at the time of qualification than perhaps their forebears did.
A number of dentists, including the head of a leading dental college, has said to me that he could not describe his dentists as well qualified in anaesthetics when they leave. Therefore, I mean, newly qualified dentists can still carry out general anaesthetics. There surely must be something to do which can tighten up this procedure.
Yes, well, there have been 2 recent reports, one by Dr. Wiley from the Faculty of Anaesthetists at the Royal College, and a more recent one by Professor Seward from the Royal College, recommending the establishment of postgraduate courses for both doctors and dentists who wish to carry out anaesthesia for dental procedures. And certainly the Council is strongly in favour of these courses being provided and of dentists being encouraged to attend them.
Could you not therefore make it compulsory that dentists do have this training?
The Department of Health could make it compulsory by making it one of the items for which a fee would only be payable if the dentist in fact did hold the qualification.
Would you like to see that happen?
I don't think it's feasible at this stage. I think it's something towards which we may very well work in the future.
Meanwhile, a dentist can still, if he likes, put me under a general anaesthetic without really being qualified to do so.
He is as qualified as the average doctor, and his record as a safe anaesthetist is indeed a very good one. The number of fatalities in dental anaesthesia where the dentist has acted as anaesthetist is very, very small indeed.
Sir Frank Lawton, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you.
The Soviet Communist Party General Secretary Yuri Andropov is in Prague on his first foreign trip since taking office last November. In meeting his Warsaw Pact allies, he's revealing his priorities: to keep his alliance in order and to get that alliance to endorse Soviet proposals for nuclear deployments in Europe. Today, the Warsaw Pact's party leaders, prime ministers, defense ministers and foreign ministers reviewed those proposals individually already launched by Mr. Andropov. His earlier ideas of reducing Soviet medium-range weapons to the same levels as the British and French ones, and of starting the process of reducing Soviet and American long-range nuclear weapons. Once adopted, they'll allow the Warsaw Pact to stand united in this Europe's year of nuclear weapons. But is the Pact united in anything else?